Welcome to A Quiet Journey. Tonight, we are leaving the noise behind. We are traveling to a place where time moves differently, where the minutes stretch into years and the years into centuries. Imagine yourself standing at the base of the White Mountains in eastern California. The air here is different. It is cool, sharp, and carries a profound stillness that you can only find in the high places of the world. As we begin our ascent, the familiar sounds of the modern world, the distant hum of traffic, the buzz of electronics, the constant chatter of a busy life, slowly fade into a soft, natural balance. We are here to visit a very special resident of these peaks, the Great Basin bristlecone pine, or Pinus longeva. These trees are extraordinary. They are recognized as the oldest non-clonal living organisms on Earth. To understand what that means, we must think about how life persists across the ages. Some ancient forests, like the famous aspen groves, survived by cloning themselves, sending up new shoots from a single massive root system that might be tens of thousands of years old. But the bristlecone is different. Each tree is a singular life, a lone sentinel that began from a single seed thousands of years ago and has maintained its individual existence ever since. Every branch, every needle, and every ring in its wood belongs to one unique individual that has braved the elements for millennia. Before we settle deeper into the cool shadows of these ancient groves, I want to gently invite you to subscribe and like this video if you find this quiet space helpful for your rest. It is a small way to stay connected to these peaceful journeys, and I would be so glad to have you join us again as we explore the wonders of our world. But for now, there is no rush. There is nothing you need to do. Just let your breath be easy. Let the weight of the day lift as we climb higher into the stillness. As we move upward, the lush greens of the lower elevations begin to give way to a more rugged, sparse beauty. The sagebrush thins out, the air grows colder, and the sky becomes a deeper, more brilliant blue even as the sun begins to dip toward the horizon. We are entering the realm of the ancients, a place where the environment is so harsh that only the strongest, most patient life can endure. Here, on these high-altitude slopes, the world feels very old and very wise. The wind whispers through needles that have seen empires rise and fall, and the stars seem just a little bit closer, as if they are watching over these silent guardians. We are leaving the world of the fast and the temporary, and entering the world of the eternal. The ground beneath us is changing, becoming rocky and pale as we reach the heights where the bristlecones make their stand. We are leaving the modern world behind, stepping into a landscape that has remained largely unchanged for 5,000 years. The air is thinning now, becoming pure and cold, and the silence of the high peaks is beginning to wrap around us like a heavy, comfortable blanket. As we climb higher, we prepare to see how these trees have mastered the art of survival in a place where most life simply cannot follow. As we step further into the grove, the landscape reveals itself as a study in silver and gold. The sunlight here has a different quality. It feels more direct, more piercing through the thin atmosphere, yet the shadows remain deep and cool. You might notice that the trees are spaced far apart like solitary monks in a vast open-air cathedral of stone. There is no dense canopy of leaves to block the sky, only the twisted, orange-hued forms of the pines reaching toward the heavens. We are standing now at an elevation that most living things find inhospitable. These trees thrive at altitudes between 9,000 and 11,000 feet above sea level. Up here, the world is transformed. The air is remarkably thin, and the oxygen that fuels most life is sparse and precious. At this height, the atmosphere no longer acts as a thick, warm blanket. Instead, it is a clear, cold window into the cosmos. The wind here is a constant companion, sometimes a gentle sigh, and sometimes a powerful force that carves the very landscape. Yet the bristlecones remain unmoved. As you listen to the quiet rhythm of this mountain, I invite you to take a slow, deep breath with me. Inhale the cool, imagined air of these high peaks. It is clean, silent, and incredibly still. As you exhale, let the tension leave your body, matching the unhurried pace of the forest. Just like the trees, you are here, steady and calm in this high, quiet place. There is no need to rush. There is only the present moment, the cool air, and the vast open sky. It is a beautiful irony of nature that these extreme conditions are exactly what allow the bristlecone pine to survive for millennia. In the lush green valleys far below, life is a frantic race. Plants compete for sunlight, for space, and for water. They grow quickly, but they also perish quickly, succumbing to rot, insects, or the shadows of their neighbors. But up here, in the thin air and the biting cold, the rules of life are different. The bristlecones have made a biological pact with the mountains. By choosing a place where almost nothing else can grow, they have eliminated their competition. There are no fast-growing weeds to choke out their seedlings, and no dense thickets of brush to fuel catastrophic fires. The very hardships of the high peaks, the short growing seasons that sometimes last only a few weeks, the intense ultraviolet light, and the lack of oxygen have forced these trees to become masters of economy. They grow with such incredible patience that they have stepped outside the normal boundaries of time. They have traded the fleeting success of a rapid life for the enduring wisdom of an ancient one. As we look closer at the ground where these ancients have made their stand, we begin to see that their survival isn't just about the air they breathe, but the very foundation they cling to. The earth beneath our feet is changing. It isn't the dark, soft soil of a typical forest. Instead, it is a stark, shimmering expanse of white rock, a geological anomaly that holds the next secret to their longevity. This peculiar rocky ground is where the story of the bristlecone truly begins to take root. As we step further into the grove, the ground beneath our feet feels different. It is no longer the soft, dark needles and rich earth of a lower forest, but a pale, shimmering expanse of white and gray stone. This is the secret held in the soil, a unique geological foundation known as dolomite. To the casual eye, it might look like a dusting of late-season snow clinging to the ridges, but this is actually a very specific type of limestone, born from the remnants of an ancient seabed that was pushed high into the sky millions of years ago. Dolomite is a harsh master for most living things. It is remarkably rich in magnesium and strangely low in the vital nutrients that most plants crave, such as phosphorus and nitrogen. For the majority of the vegetable kingdom, this white rocky ground is a chemical desert. a barrier that is simply too difficult to cross. Most seeds that land here will never sprout, unable to find the nourishment they need or find the magnesium-heavy soil too toxic to endure. But the bristlecone pine has learned to thrive in this alkaline cradle. Over thousands of generations, it has adapted its biology to extract what it needs from the very stones themselves, turning an inhospitable wasteland into a private sanctuary. By choosing this rocky ground, the bristlecone has secured its greatest survival advantage: solitude. Because other plants, the fast-growing grasses, the thirsty shrubs, and the aggressive saplings of other species, cannot survive in the dolomite, the bristlecones stand alone. There is no competition here. There is no one to steal their precious limited water, and no one to grow tall enough to block their access to the sun. They are the sole inhabitants of these white slopes, ruling over a kingdom of rock where they never have to rush to outgrow a neighbor. This isolation provides an even deeper, more vital level of protection. In a world where wildfire is a constant and devastating threat to a forest, the dolomite serves as a natural geological shield. Because the soil is so nutrient poor, there is very little fuel on the ground. There are no thickets of brush or carpets of dry grass to carry a flame from one tree to the next. The bristlecones grow far apart, separated by wide stretches of cool white stone. If lightning were to strike one tree, the fire would likely end there, unable to leap across the barren rock to its companions. These ancients lived in a forest that is naturally fireproof, a sanctuary of stone where the only thing that moves across the ground is the slow, shifting shadow of the clouds. This unique relationship between the tree and the earth has shaped not just their history, but their very form. As you look up from the pale, chalky ground to the trees themselves, you begin to see shapes that defy the imagination. They do not look like the tall, straight, green pines of the lower valleys. Instead, they rise from the dolomite like ancient sculptures of silver and amber, weathered by the passage of ages into forms that tell the story of their struggle and their incredible endurance. When you look at them, you aren't just looking at a tree, you are looking at the physical manifestation of time itself. As your eyes move across these ancient forms, you might find yourself wondering if you are looking at a living thing at all. Many who visit these high, lonely groves for the first time are struck by a strange realization. These trees look more like ghosts than plants. They have been called living driftwood, a name that perfectly captures their weathered, sculptural beauty. Instead of the thick, protective bark we expect to see on a pine, the wood of a bristlecone is often completely bare, polished to a high, metallic sheen. In the low light of a mountain sunset, this wood glows with deep oranges, rich reds, and soft, ghostly silvers, looking as though it has been buffed by the steady hand of a master carpenter over 1,000 years. But this beauty is born of a relentless, silent struggle. At 10,000 feet, the environment is not just cold, it is abrasive. For centuries, and then for millennia, these trees have stood their ground against winds that carry frozen needles of ice and sharp grains of quartz sand. This is a process of natural sandblasting, a slow and steady erosion that strips away the softer outer layers of the tree. While a typical tree would rot or break under such pressure, the bristlecone is different. Its wood is so incredibly dense, packed tight with protective resins, that it does not decay. Instead of crumbling, it wears down, cell by cell, over hundreds of years. The wind and ice act as a sculptor's chisel, carving deep, fluid grooves into the trunk and smoothing the edges until the tree takes on a twisted, spiraling form that follows the very path of the wind itself. If you were to walk around one of these ancients, you might see a trunk 5 feet wide that appears entirely dead, a massive, sun-bleached skeleton of wood that has been standing since before the rise of modern civilizations. But then, as you look higher, your eyes find a small miracle. Tucked away on a single gnarled branch, there is a cluster of vibrant deep green needles, bunched together like a fox's tail. It is a startling contrast, the silvered, ancient wood below and the bright, persistent life above. This is how the bristlecone survives the unimaginable passage of time. It does not try to maintain a massive, leafy canopy that would require more energy and water than the mountain can provide. Instead, it has learned the art of letting go. It focuses all of its remaining strength into a tiny fraction of its being, keeping just enough green needles to breathe and just enough roots to hold fast to the stone. The rest of the tree, often the vast majority of its physical body, is allowed to become a silent monument to the years it has already endured. As we look closer at how this small spark of life remains connected to the earth through such a weathered, skeletal frame, we begin to see the incredible engineering of their internal systems. The tree has developed a way to survive even as its own body slowly turns to stone, maintaining a narrow, hidden pathway for life to travel from the deep earth to the high, thin air. This narrow, hidden pathway is known to botanists as strip barking, a survival strategy that is as beautiful as it is practical. In the world of the ancient bristlecone, growth does not always mean getting bigger. Sometimes it means getting simpler. As the centuries press against the tree and the soil erodes, or the winters grow too long to sustain a full canopy, the bristlecone makes a quiet, calculated decision. It begins to let parts of itself go. Imagine standing before a tree that has seen 4,000 summers. Its trunk might be several feet wide, a massive pillar of sun-bleached silver wood that looks like a sculpture found at the bottom of a desert sea. To the untrained eye, it looks entirely dead, a ghost of a tree. But then you notice a single narrow ribbon of bark, perhaps only 2 or 3 inches wide, that starts at the base and winds its way upward, spiraling round the dead wood like a climbing vine. This is the lifeline. This strip of living tissue is the only part of the tree that is still growing, still breathing, and still connected to the deep roots below. While the rest of the bark has fallen away, exposing the dense heartwood to the elements, this one thin channel remains resilient. It carries every drop of water and every grain of nutrient from the earth up to a few select branches at the very top. It is a masterpiece of biological efficiency. By retreating into this narrow strip, the bristlecone reduces the amount of energy it needs to survive. It no longer has to maintain a massive circumference of living cells. It only has to sustain this one small vital pulse. It is a strategic retreat, a way of huddling inward to protect the spark of life from the cold. Because of this, a tree can continue to live and even produce seeds, even if 90% of its physical body has technically perished. It is a living lesson in the power of focus, the understanding that by letting go of what is unnecessary, we can endure almost anything. As you look at this thin ribbon of cinnamon-colored bark, you can almost feel the slow, steady rhythm of the tree's life. There is no rush here. The sap moves with a patience that matches the mountain itself. The tree is not competing with its neighbors. It is not trying to reach higher or grow faster. It is simply staying present, holding on to its lifeline with a quiet, unwavering grip. In the stillness of the grove, where the only sound is the occasional sigh of the wind through the rocks, this economy of life feels deeply peaceful. The tree has found a perfect balance with its harsh home. It does not fight the wind or the drought. It simply adjusts its shape, narrowing its focus until it becomes a concentrated essence of survival. And at the very end of this winding, spiraling lifeline, held high against the deep blue of the alpine sky, are the needles. These small, dark green clusters are the engines of the tree, the places where sunlight is transformed into the very energy that keeps the lifeline flowing. But like the bark and the wood, these needles have their own extraordinary story of endurance, functioning in a way that defies the typical cycles of the natural world. Instead of falling with the seasons, they hold fast, staying green and vibrant through decades of mountain winters, waiting for the brief, golden warmth of the summer sun. If you were to look closely at these needles, you would see that they are not like the long, soft needles of a valley pine. They are short, rarely more than an inch or two in length, and they grow in dense, crowded clusters of 5. They look like small green bottle brushes, hugging the ends of the branches. In the world of botany, most evergreen trees follow a predictable cycle. A needle grows, it works for a few years to provide the tree with energy, and then it turns brown and falls to the forest floor, replaced by new growth. For most pines, this cycle takes only 2 to 5 years. But here, on the roof of the world, life cannot afford such waste. The bristlecone pine has mastered the art of holding on. A single needle on one of these ancient branches can remain green, healthy, and functional for 30 and sometimes even 40 years. This is a feat of endurance that is almost unmatched in the plant kingdom. While the world below changes, while seasons turn into decades and children grow into adults, that one tiny needle remains in place, steady and unwavering. It is a small green miracle of persistence. Take a slow, deep breath now, and as you exhale, try to imagine the longevity of that single needle. Think of everything it has witnessed from its high, lonely perch. It was there during the winters of the 1990s, buried under feet of snow. It was there through the droughts of the early 2000s, holding its breath and waiting for rain. It has felt the touch of 1,000 mountain storms in the silent, silver light of 10,000 moonlit nights. And yet, it remains. It does not rush to fall. It does not give up its place. It simply continues to do its quiet work year after year, decade after decade. This incredible lifespan is possible because the needle is built like a fortress. It is covered in a thick, waxy coating that prevents precious moisture from escaping into the thin, dry air. It is designed to be efficient, to squeeze every bit of energy out of the sunlight while giving almost nothing back to the harsh environment. There is a profound peace in this kind of constancy. In a world that often feels like it is moving too fast, The bristlecone needle reminds us that there is value in staying still, in simply enduring. But this external patience, this refusal to let go of its green leaves, is only half of the story. The tree's endurance is not just a matter of what it keeps on the outside, but how it grows on the inside. As we move our focus away from the green tips of the branches and travel deep into the heart of the trunk, we find a world where time slows down even further. Just as the needles refuse to rush their life cycle, the wood itself grows with a deliberate, almost microscopic caution. It is a pace of life that is so slow, it is nearly indistinguishable from the stones themselves. Imagine the world around us. We are used to things that happen quickly. Flowers bloom and fade in a few weeks. Grass grows tall in a single summer. Even we humans measure our lives in days and months that seem to fly by. But for the bristlecone pine, time is not a river that rushes. It is a slow, steady drip of resin. On these high, rocky slopes, the concept of fast simply does not exist. The tree does not compete with its neighbors to see who can reach the sunlight first. Instead, it enters into a long, patient contract with the mountain, agreeing to grow only as much as the harsh environment will allow. In the thin air of the White Mountains, the growing season is painfully short. Sometimes it lasts only a few weeks between the final thaw of spring and the first killing frost of autumn. During this brief window, the tree must do all of its work for the entire year. It must wake up from its deep winter sleep, draw what little moisture it can from the dolomite soil, and add a new layer of wood to its trunk. In a good year, with plenty of snowmelt and mild temperatures, the tree might add a visible sliver of new wood. But in a particularly difficult year, perhaps a year of deep drought or an endless, biting winter, the tree's growth is so minimal that it is almost non-existent. In these harsh times, a bristlecone may add a ring that is only 2 or 3 cells wide. Think of that for a moment. An entire year of life, of enduring the wind and the cold, condensed into a space so small that it cannot be seen without the help of a powerful microscope. To the naked eye, it is as if the tree did not grow at all. It simply was. It stood its ground, held its breath, and waited for the next year to be kinder. But there is a hidden strength in this refusal to rush. Because the tree grows so slowly, the wood it produces is unlike almost any other wood on earth. It is incredibly dense. It is heavy, hard, and saturated with high concentrations of resin. This resin acts like a natural preservative, a shield that protects the tree from the inside out. While other trees might fall prey to rot or be hollowed out by fungi and hungry insects, the bristlecone remains solid. The wood is so dense that a common wood-boring beetle would find it nearly impossible to make a home there. It is more like a pillar of amber or a piece of living stone than a typical tree trunk. Even after the tree finally dies, its wood can stand for thousands of years, refusing to decay simply because it was built with such agonizing, careful slowness. Take a moment now to feel that density in your own body. Let your limbs feel heavy and still, like the ancient, resin-filled wood of the bristlecone. There is no need to move. There is no need to grow quickly. There is only the quiet, steady strength of being. This slow, deliberate growth does more than just protect the tree. It creates a record, because each year is etched into the wood, even those years that are only a few cells wide. The tree becomes a living diary of the planet's history. Every ring is a sentence, and every decade is a chapter. To those who know how to look, these microscopic patterns tell a story that stretches back further than any human memory. It is a language of circles, a silent conversation between the tree and the sky. By learning to read these rings, we can begin to understand the secrets of the Earth's past, peering through the lens of a science that turns tree trunks into calendars. This language of circles has a name that sounds almost like a lullaby when spoken slowly. Dendrochronology. It comes from the Greek words for tree and time, and it is the art of listening to what the wood has to say. For a long time, people saw tree rings as nothing more than a simple way to tell how old a tree was. You count the lines and you find the age. But in the early 1900s, a man named A.E. Douglas looked at these rings and saw something much deeper. He wasn't actually a botanist. He was an astronomer, a man who spent his nights looking at the stars and the sun. He was searching for a way to understand how solar cycles affected the weather here on Earth. And he found his answer not in the sky, but in the silent, silvered trunks of trees. Douglas realized that these rings were not just markers of age, they were a calendar of the world's climate. He saw the trees growing in the same area, experiencing the same droughts and the same rainy seasons, all told the same story. Their rings were like a fingerprint of time itself. Every single ring represents 1 year, one full rotation of our planet around the sun. It is a heartbeat of the Earth, captured in cellulose and lignin. When the world was warm and wet, the heartbeat was strong and the ring was wide. When the world was cold and dry, the heartbeat was faint and the ring was narrow. Imagine, as you lie there, that you are turning the pages of a very old, very heavy book. Each page is a year. In the bristlecone pine, this book is thousands of pages long. It is a library of the environment, a record of every storm, every heat wave, and every frost that has touched the mountain since before the dawn of modern civilization. To read this book, scientists use the alphabet of the tree ring. Just as we use letters to form words and words to form stories, the tree uses the thickness, the density, and the color of its wood to describe the year it just lived through. This alphabet is written in the very fabric of the tree's body. It is a slow, steady recording that never forgets and never lies. It is the ultimate witness. When we look at a cross-section of an ancient bristlecone, we are looking at a physical map of time. We are seeing the rhythm of the seasons preserved in a way that our own memories could never manage. We are learning to read the shorthand of the natural world, a code that was written in silence over the course of 5 millennia. But to truly understand this story, we must look even closer. We must look at the anatomy of a single year, the way a tree builds its home, cell by cell, from the first thaw of spring to the first bite of autumn. Each ring, though it looks like a single line from a distance, is actually a complex structure with its own beginning, middle, and end. It is a tiny masterpiece of biological engineering, a small window into the life of the tree during a single specific journey around the sun. To the trained eye, the wood reveals exactly when the sap began to flow and when the cold began to return. When we peer into the microscopic world of a single tree ring, we see two distinct bands that tell the story of a year's beginning and its end. The first band is what scientists call early wood. It forms in the gentle awakening of spring when the mountain snow finally begins to melt and the roots find their first deep sip of cold, clear water. In this season of renewal, the tree is eager to grow. It builds large cells with thin walls designed to move water quickly and efficiently up the trunk to the needles high above. This wood is light in color, almost like the pale morning sun reflecting off the white dolomite rocks. It represents a time of expansion, a moment when the tree is reaching out to the world, drinking in the light and the moisture of a new season. As the intense heat of the high-altitude summer settles in and the moisture in the rocky soil begins to dwindle, the tree quietly changes its strategy. It begins to produce late wood. These cells are much smaller, with thick, dense walls that provide the tree with its incredible structural strength. This wood is darker, forming a sharp, clear boundary that marks the end of the growing season. If the early wood is the tree's breath out, a soft, expansive gesture, then the late wood is its breath in, a tightening, a strengthening, and a quiet preparation for the winter that it knows is coming. Together, these two bands, one light and airy, one dark and solid, complete the circle of a single year. It is a beautiful rhythmic process, a steady pulse of life that has repeated itself thousands of times in the very same trunk. But sometimes the rhythm is interrupted. Imagine a year where the summer never truly arrives. Perhaps a massive volcano has erupted on the other side of the planet, casting a veil of ash into the stratosphere and blocking the sun's warmth for months on end. In the middle of what should have been the growing season, a sudden, brutal frost strikes the high peaks. The tender, water-filled cells of the early wood are frozen instantly. Because water expands when it turns to ice, it shatters the delicate cell walls from the inside out. This creates what is known as a frost ring, a microscopic scar of twisted, crushed, and distorted cells that the tree will carry for the rest of its life. It is a physical memory of a global event, a record of a year when the world went dark and the mountain stayed cold. To a scientist, a frost ring is a landmark in time, allowing them to pin down a specific historical cataclysm with absolute precision. It is the tree's way of saying, I remember I was here and I survived it. As we move our gaze back from these individual cells and narrow rings, the patterns begin to emerge. A single ring tells us of 1 year, but a sequence of rings tells us of an entire era. We start to see groups of wide rings that speak of long golden periods of plenty, followed by clusters of narrow, tight rings that whisper of centuries-long droughts. These patterns are the signature of the climate, a rhythmic pulse that spans decades. Just as a single note contributes to a long, slow melody, these individual years form a grand symphony of survival. We are beginning to see how the life of one tree is woven into the larger fabric of the planet's history, drifting from the story of a single season into the vast overlapping patterns of time itself. This signature of the climate is not a solitary thing. It is a shared experience, a collective memory held by every tree on the mountain. When a long parched drought settles over the White Mountains, it doesn't just touch one root system. It touches them all. Every bristlecone from the smallest sapling to the ancient titan feels the same thirst. Their rings reflect this shared struggle, creating a pattern that is remarkably consistent across the entire grove. It is as if the mountain itself is writing a diary, and every tree is using the same ink and the same handwriting to record the passing years. Think of these patterns as a barcode of time, a sequence of 3 narrow rings followed by 1 wide, then 2 narrow again. This specific sequence becomes a fingerprint for a particular decade in history because the weather, the rainfall, and the temperature is the same for all the trees in this high-altitude neighborhood. They all produce the same barcode for the same period. This consistency is the foundation of a remarkable scientific detective tool called cross-dating. This is where the true magic of dendrochronology begins. Scientists realized that if they could find this same fingerprint in 2 different trees, they could link their stories together. It is a process of matching patterns, much like fitting together the pieces of a vast wooden puzzle. Imagine a tree that lived for 2,000 years but died long ago. Its rings record the climate of a distant, ancient past. Then imagine a younger tree, perhaps one that is still alive today, that sprouted while that older tree was still standing. For a few centuries, their lives overlapped. They breathed the same thin air, endured the same bitter winters, and drank from the same rare summer rains. Because they shared that specific window of time, their ring patterns for those overlapping years are identical. They are a perfect match, a biological handshake across the centuries. By finding these points of overlap, scientists can stitch the timelines of different trees together. It is a slow and steady process, matching the end of an old tree's life with the beginning of a younger one's. But as they do this, a bridge begins to form, a bridge that leads us deeper and deeper into the past. We are no longer limited by the lifespan of a single organism, no matter how long-lived it may be. We can step from one tree to the next and then to the next like smooth stones in a quiet stream, moving further and further back into the mists of history. We are beginning to look back much further than any single living thing could ever remember, finding a path that leads us toward a truly staggering record of our world's ancient story. This grand invisible bridge, built ring by ring and century by century, is known to scientists as the master chronology of the White Mountains. It is far more than just a collection of old wood. It is a library of time itself. An unbroken, meticulously detailed record of our planet's climate that stretches back over 10,000 years. To build this monumental calendar, researchers do not rely solely on the living giants that still hold their green needles toward the sun. Instead, they look to the elders that have finally succumbed to the elements, the trees that stand as silvered, wind-polished skeletons against the deep blue of the mountain sky. These are what scientists call the standing dead. They are trees that may have stopped growing 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, yet they still refuse to fall, held upright by the strength of their own resin-hardened hearts. And beneath these standing sentinels resting quietly on the white dolomite soil, are the fallen logs, ancient, heavy remnants that have lain undisturbed for even longer. By overlapping the ring patterns of these three distinct groups, the living, the standing dead, and the long fallen, a single continuous timeline emerges. It is a masterpiece of natural history, a wooden chain where every link is a single year and every year is a faithful witness to the changing world. This chain is so long and so sturdy that it allows us to walk back through time, year by year, without ever losing our place. Take a slow, deep breath now, and as you exhale, try to feel the immense weight of those 10,000 years. It is a long, quiet line of history stretching back to a time when the last great ice sheets were still retreating and the world was just beginning to wake up to a new epoch. 10 millennia of sunrises and sunsets, of bitter howling winters and brief golden summers, all recorded in the silent, cellular language of the rings. It is a span of time that encompasses the entirety of human civilization. Yet, for the bristlecone, it is simply the natural rhythm of the mountain. This incredible feat of preservation, this ability to read a diary written 10,000 years ago, is only possible because of a strange and beautiful phenomenon found specifically in these high, arid altitudes. As we move deeper into the grove, we find ourselves entering the realm of the ghost forests. Here, the slopes are scattered with wood that looks as though it might have fallen only yesterday, yet it carries the secrets of eras long forgotten. In this place, the line between the living and the long departed begins to blur, and we begin to understand how wood, in the right conditions, can become as permanent and as telling as stone. In the quiet, thin air of these high ridges, something remarkable happens to the fallen. In most forests around the world, a tree that falls to the earth is quickly reclaimed by the cycle of life. Mushrooms sprout from its damp bark, insects tunnel into its softened heart, and the moisture of the soil slowly dissolves its form back into the earth. But here, in the ancient bristlecone groves, the wood refuses to disappear. It lingers, century after century, resisting the very touch of time. This persistence is born from a unique harmony between the tree's own nature and the harsh environment it calls home. The secret lies deep within the wood itself, which is so saturated with thick golden resin that it is more like a solid block of amber than traditional timber. This resin acts as a natural preservative, a chemical shield that is nearly impenetrable to the fungi and bacteria that cause rot. Combined with the cold, arid climate of the White Mountains, where there is very little moisture to encourage decay, the wood becomes virtually immortal. Because of this, a bristlecone log can lie on the rocky ground for 4,000 years without rotting. Think of that for a moment as you settle deeper into your covers. A tree that fell when the Great Pyramid of Giza was still new may still be resting on the same slope today, its silvered grain polished by the wind, but its internal structure perfectly intact. These are the ghost trees, the pale, weathered remnants that haunt the high slopes, looking as though they might have fallen only yesterday, yet carrying the memories of millennia. These ghost trees are the silent keepers of the Holocene epoch, the current geological period that has seen the rise of all human civilization. While the living trees record the present and the recent past, these ancient logs hold the secrets of much deeper eras. They are perfectly preserved archives of a world that existed long before the first words were written. Every ring within their dense, resinous hearts is a data point, a frozen moment of history that allows us to see exactly how much rain fell or how cold the winters were thousands of years ago. As you breathe in the cool, imagined air of the mountain, visualize these silvered logs scattered across the white dolomite. They are not debris. They are a library of the Earth's history, waiting patiently to be read. For a long time, we looked at these trees and saw only their beauty and their age. But as scientists began to master the language of the rings, they realized that these ghost trees held a power far greater than anyone had imagined. This wood, which refused to vanish, was about to provide a bridge between the natural world and the story of humanity. By comparing the rings of these ancient logs to the artifacts found in the ruins of human history, researchers began to notice something startling. The trees were not just telling us about the weather, they were about to provide a vital correction to our understanding of ourselves. The silent testimony of the bristlecone was about to rewrite the very timeline of human achievement, revealing that the history we thought we knew was far older and more complex than we had ever dared to dream. In the mid-20th century, a quiet revolution began, one that would change how we see the timeline of human existence. It is often called the radiocarbon revolution. At its heart was a simple yet profound realization that the physics of the stars and the growth of a tree are intimately connected. Scientists had developed a way to date ancient objects by measuring a specific type of carbon called carbon-14. This carbon is absorbed by all living things while they are alive, and when they die, it slowly disappears at a steady, predictable rate, like a tiny invisible hourglass. By measuring how much is left in an ancient artifact, we can estimate how long it has been since that piece of wood or fragment of bone was part of a living being. It was a breakthrough that promised to map the history of the world. But there was a subtle problem. The amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere isn't always the same. It breathes and flows with the cycles of the sun and the shifts in the Earth's magnetic field. This meant that the hourglass of carbon dating wasn't always perfectly accurate. It was like a clock that occasionally ticked a little too fast or a little too slow. It needed a reference, a way to check its work against a clock that never misses a beat. That clock was the bristlecone pine. Because these trees create a clear, unmistakable ring every single year, they provide an absolute record of time. A scientist can take a sliver of wood from a ring that grew exactly 4,210 years ago and measure its carbon. If the carbon dating says the wood is only 4,000 years old, we know the carbon clock is slightly off for that specific era. The tree, in its silent and sturdy way, provides the correction. This calibration changed everything. When researchers applied these new tree-corrected dates to ancient monuments in Europe, great stone circles and megalithic tombs like Stonehenge, they discovered something remarkable. These structures were hundreds, sometimes even 1,000 years older than previously believed. The history books had to be rewritten. It turned out that the people of ancient Europe were building massive stone monuments long before the influences of the Mediterranean or the Near East had reached them. The trees had spoken, and the story of human progress was suddenly much longer and more mysterious than we had ever imagined. As you rest, consider the weight of this truth. The trees acted as a physical check on the laws of physics. They are a bridge between the abstract world of radioactive decay and the tangible world of wood and bark. They ensure that our history is anchored in reality, providing a steady hand to guide us through the fog of the deep past. But the rings do more than just calibrate our clocks and measure the passage of time. They are also sensitive to the sudden, violent shifts in the Earth's temperament. While they record the slow, steady passage of centuries, they also catch the echoes of distant, world-shaking events. These trees, standing on their lonely peaks, have felt the ground tremble and the skies darken from events that occurred half a world away, leaving permanent marks in their wooden hearts that scientists are only now beginning to decode. Imagine the mountain air, already crisp and thin, suddenly growing even colder. It is a chill that does not belong to the typical cycle of the seasons, a lingering, pervasive frost that arrives in the height of what should be the growing season. While the bristlecone pine stands in its silent vigil, it feels these shifts in the earth's temperament with a sensitivity that surpasses almost any other living thing. Deep within its trunk, the tree records these moments of planetary distress as frost rings. A frost ring is a tiny microscopic scar. It occurs when a sudden, severe freeze happens during the short window of the summer growing season. The water inside the tree's newly forming cells freezes, banding and shattering the delicate cell walls before they have had a chance to harden. To the naked eye, it might look like a slight distortion in the wood, but to a scientist with a microscope, it is a clear, undeniable cry from the past. It is the signature of a volcanic winter. One of the most profound examples of this can be found by looking back roughly 3,500 years. Around the year 1628 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption occurred on the island of Thera, in what we now know as Santorini, Greece. It was one of the largest volcanic events in human history, sending a colossal veil of ash and sulfur high into the stratosphere. This veil acted like a mirror, reflecting the sun's warmth back into space and casting a literal shadow over the entire globe. On a lonely, windswept peak in the White Mountains of California, thousands of miles away from the Mediterranean, the bristlecone pines felt that shadow. The summer of that year never truly arrived. The air stayed bitter, and the trees attempting to add their annual layer of wood were caught in a killing frost. When we look at the rings of the ancient trees from that era, we see a distinctive, crushed layer of cells, a frost ring that aligns perfectly with the timeline of the Thera eruption. It is a staggering thought to hold as you drift toward sleep. A tree rooted in the rocky soil of the American West, shivering from the cold of a volcano erupting on the other side of the planet. These trees are not isolated individuals. They are connected to the global heartbeat. They are the Earth's witnesses, capturing the echoes of cataclysms that reshaped civilizations and altered the very chemistry of our air. But the sensitivity of the bristlecone pine extends even further than the boundaries of our own world. The wood does not only record the shaking of the earth or the cooling of the atmosphere from volcanic ash. If you look even closer, into the very atoms that make up the cellulose of the rings, you find that these trees have also been watching the sky. They have been quietly recording the behavior of the sun and the arrival of invisible particles from the furthest reaches of the galaxy, turning the history of the cosmos into a story written in sap and fiber. As you lie there, perhaps feeling the warmth of your blankets, think of the sun, that great golden orb that provides the light and energy for all life on our planet. It isn't a static lamp in the sky. It pulses and breathes with its own long, mysterious cycles of activity. And as it does, it leaves a signature, a delicate chemical fingerprint deep inside the wood of the bristlecone pine. Every time a tree takes a breath, pulling in carbon dioxide from the air to build its trunk, its branches, and its needles, it is performing a quiet miracle of construction. Most of the carbon it breathes is stable, but a tiny microscopic fraction of it is an isotope called carbon-14. This specific type of carbon is born high in our atmosphere, created when high-energy particles from the furthest reaches of the galaxy, known as cosmic rays, collide with nitrogen atoms. This is where the sun becomes the tree's silent partner. The sun possesses a powerful magnetic field that acts like a shield for our entire solar system. When the sun is very active, its magnetic shield is strong, and it deflects many of those wandering cosmic rays away from Earth. During these times, less carbon-14 is produced in our air, and the tree absorbs less of it into its rings. But when the sun goes quiet and its activity wanes, the shield weakens. More cosmic rays rain down upon our atmosphere, more carbon-14 is created, and the tree faithfully records this surge in its annual growth. By analyzing the chemical makeup of these ancient rings, cell by cell, scientists can look back and see the sun's behavior over thousands of years. They can see the Maunder minimum, a famous period between roughly 1645 and 1715, when sunspots almost completely disappeared. This was a long, quiet sleep for the sun, coinciding with what historians call the Little Ice Age, a time when winters were so bitter that the River Thames in London froze solid, and harvests failed across the globe. The bristlecone pines were there, standing in the thin, cold mountain air, quietly absorbing the evidence of a sleeping sun, while humans in distant lands struggled through the frost, wondering why the seasons had turned so harsh. These trees were etching the answer into their very fiber. It is a profound realization to hold as you drift toward sleep. These trees are not just biological organisms, they are living observatories. They have captured the rhythms of the solar system and the distant whispers of the stars, turning the invisible movements of the cosmos into a physical history made of wood and resin. As we sit with the weight of this cosmic history, our focus begins to shift from the broad, sweeping patterns of the forest to the specific, legendary individuals that have carried these secrets for so long. In the quiet, hidden groves of the White Mountains, there are certain trees that have become more than just plants. They have become icons of endurance. We begin to move our attention toward one tree in particular, a silent, gnarled sentinel that has stood for nearly 5 millennia, watching the world change while it remained steadfast in the stone. In the heart of the Schulman Grove, high within the embrace of the White Mountains, there is a tree with a name that carries the weight of nearly 5,000 years. They call it Methuselah. For many decades, this single gnarled pine was recognized as the oldest known living non-clonal organism on our entire planet. To truly grasp the age of this tree, we have to look back across a span of time that defies our usual understanding of history. Methuselah is currently estimated to be over 4,850 years old. Think for a moment about what that means. When Methuselah was just a tiny seedling, pushing its first green needles through the cold, rocky soil, the Great Pyramid of Giza had not yet been built. The first dynasties of Egypt were only just beginning to take shape. While human empires rose, flourished, and eventually crumbled into the dust of the past, Methuselah remained exactly where it is today, adding its microscopic rings one slow, patient year at a time. It has stood through the entirety of what we consider modern civilization, a silent witness to the long, winding story of humanity from a distance of 2 miles above the sea. If you were to hike through these mountains today, following the winding trails through the ancient groves, you might find yourself standing right next to this legendary being without ever knowing it. There is a profound sense of mystery surrounding Methuselah because its exact location is a closely guarded secret. The United States Forest Service does not mark the tree. There are no signs pointing the way, no plaques at its base, and no fences to set it apart from its neighbors. To the untrained eye, it looks much like the other ancient bristlecones nearby, twisted, weathered, and half-clothed in golden wood. This anonymity is a deliberate act of protection. In our modern world, where the desire to touch or document rare things can sometimes lead to unintentional harm, the safest place for Methuselah is in the quiet, indistinguishable company of its peers. It is hidden in plain sight, protected by the very silence that has sustained it for 5 millennia. By keeping its identity a secret, scientists ensure that the tree can continue its long life without the stress of soil compaction from thousands of footsteps or the threat of someone seeking a souvenir from its ancient bark. It lives in a state of perfect, undisturbed peace, just as it has for 48 centuries. But as we sit with the quiet majesty of Methuselah, we must also acknowledge that the deep respect and protection these trees enjoy today were not always the standard. The reverence we now feel for these ancients was, in many ways, born out of a profound and heartbreaking lesson learned in the middle of the 20th century. Before the world knew to guard these groves with such absolute care, there was another tree, one that stood on a different peak, a silent giant named Prometheus. Its story is one of the most bittersweet chapters in the history of science, a moment where the quest for knowledge collided with the fragility of a life that had endured since the dawn of time. The story of Prometheus is a quiet, heavy one, but it is an essential part of the mountain's history. In the summer of 1964, a young researcher was studying the glacial history of the area on Wheeler Peak in Nevada. He was interested in how the climate had changed over thousands of years, and he knew that the ancient bristlecones held the answers locked within their rings. He chose a tree that looked particularly weathered, a massive twisted giant that the local foresters had labeled WPN 114. At the time, the standard method for studying these trees was to use an increment borer, a long, hollow drill designed to extract a thin, pencil-sized sample from the heart of the tree without causing lasting harm. But as the researcher worked, his tool became stuck deep within the incredibly dense, resin-saturated wood. It was wedged tight, held fast by the very strength the tree had spent thousands of years building. After several failed attempts to retrieve the expensive equipment, the decision was made, with the permission of the Forest Service, to cut the tree down to retrieve the borer and study the cross-section. It was only after the tree lay still on the rocky ground that the magnitude of what had happened began to emerge. As the rings were counted under a microscope, the numbers didn't stop at 1,000 or 3,000 or even 4,000. The count kept climbing, stretching further and further back into the misty depths of prehistory. When the final ring was tallied, the realization was staggering. The tree was at least 4,862 years old. When accounting for the rings that had likely been worn away from the base over the centuries, it was estimated to be nearly 4,900 years old. In that one afternoon, the oldest known living thing on Earth had been brought to an end. This moment, though filled with a profound sense of sadness, became a powerful turning point for the natural world. The story of Prometheus, as the tree came to be known, echoed through the scientific community and the public consciousness, sparking a wave of protective measures that had never existed before. It was the catalyst that led to the creation of Great Basin National Park and the implementation of strict federal laws that now safeguard every ancient bristlecone pine with absolute intensity. Today, the legacy of Prometheus is one of vigilance and deep respect. It is the reason why the location of Methuselah remains a secret and why researchers now use much less invasive technology to study these ancients. It is strictly forbidden to even pick up a fallen branch in these groves, ensuring that every piece of wood, living or dead, remains exactly where the mountain intended it to be. As you settle deeper into your rest, you can feel a sense of peace in knowing that these groves are now among the most protected places on the planet. The lesson of the past has been deeply learned, and the silence of the high peaks is now a sacred, guarded sanctuary. The elders that remain stand in a state of perfect safety, watched over by a world that finally understands the true weight of their presence. The mountains are quiet, the air is still, and the ancients are safe in their high, stony home. And yet, even after the loss of Prometheus and the careful shielding of Methuselah, the mountains had one more surprise waiting for us, a secret hidden in the thin, cold air that would once again shift our understanding of just how long a single life can endure in the face of time. In the quiet shadows of the White Mountains, history has a way of hiding in plain sight. For nearly 50 years, the world believed that Methuselah was the oldest living individual tree on our planet. But science is a patient observer, and sometimes the most profound secrets are found not in the field, but in the archives of those who came before. In 2012, a remarkable discovery was made, not by a new expedition, but by a careful re-examination of a core sample that had been collected decades earlier by the pioneers of dendrochronology. The sample belonged to an unnamed bristlecone pine, a silent sentinel standing somewhere in the same ancient grove as Methuselah. When the rings were finally meticulously counted using modern techniques, the result was breathtaking. This tree was found to be 5,062 years old. It is an age so vast that it feels almost impossible to grasp. A bridge of living wood that stretches back over 5 millennia. To protect it from the same fate as Prometheus, its exact identity and location are kept strictly confidential, known only to a handful of researchers who guard its secret with the utmost care. Take a slow, deep breath and let that number settle in your mind. 5,062 years. To truly understand the depth of this time, we must look back at the very dawn of human civilization. Imagine this tree as a tiny seedling, just a few inches tall, pushing its first green needles through the cold, white, rocky soil. When that happened, the Great Pyramids of Giza did not yet exist. They wouldn't be built for another 5 centuries. As the first cities of Mesopotamia were being shaped by human hands, and as the very first systems of writing were being etched into clay tablets in the Fertile Crescent, this tree was already a sturdy presence on its mountain peak, weathering the same high-altitude winds that blow through its branches tonight. It has stood in the same spot while empires rose, flourished, and crumbled into dust. It was there when the first bronze tools were cast, and when the first ships set sail across unknown oceans. To this tree, the entirety of what we call modern history is just a thin layer of wood beneath its bark. It is a living witness to the long, slow heartbeat of our planet, existing in a state of quiet permanence that makes our human lives feel like the briefest flicker of a candle. It is a thought that brings a deep restorative stillness to the heart. You may wonder how a single organism can endure for so long. How does it withstand the weight of 5,000 winters without succumbing to the natural wear and tear that claims almost every other life on Earth? In our world, we are used to the idea of a fixed lifespan, a beginning, a middle, and an inevitable fading. But for the bristlecone pine, the rules of biology seem to be written in a different, more enduring language. As we look closer at the inner workings of these ancients, we find a biological phenomenon that challenges everything we think we know about the process of growing old. It is as if they have found a way to step outside of time itself, maintaining a youthfulness that lasts for millennia. This extraordinary state is known to scientists as negligible senescence. It is a term that sounds complex, but its meaning is quite simple and profoundly beautiful. Senescence is the biological process of growing old, the gradual wearing down of cells and systems that eventually leads to the end of a life. But for the Great Basin bristlecone pine, this process is so slow, so minimal, that it is practically non-existent. In most living creatures, including us, time leaves a mark on our very DNA. As cells divide and replicate over the years, small errors begin to creep in. These genetic mutations accumulate, leading to the weakening of tissues and the slowing of vital functions. It is the natural rhythm of life as we know it, a slow fading of energy and resilience. But when researchers look at the cells of a 5,000-year-old bristlecone, they find something truly miraculous. The wood, the needles, and even the pollen of these ancient elders show no signs of genetic decay. A tree that has stood since the Bronze Age is, at a cellular level, just as vibrant and healthy as a sapling that sprouted only a decade ago. Take a moment to let your mind settle on that thought. Imagine the stillness of a world where time has no power over the inner workings of life. If you were to look at the seeds produced by a tree that is 40 centuries old, you would find that they are just as likely to germinate and grow into a strong, healthy tree as the seeds of a much younger neighbor. Its internal plumbing, the complex system of vessels that carries water and nutrients from the roots to the needles, continues to function with the same efficiency it had when the tree was in its first century of life. There is no programmed expiration date hidden within its genetic code. It does not simply wear out or succumb to the infirmities of age. This means that, in a very real sense, a bristlecone pine does not die of old age. Instead, its life is usually brought to an end by the harsh external world it inhabits. After thousands of years of standing on a steep, rocky slope, the very mountain may begin to crumble beneath it. Soil erosion might eventually expose so many of its roots that the tree can no longer anchor itself against the fierce, high-altitude winds, or a stray bolt of lightning during a sudden summer storm might strike the ancient wood, finally ending a journey that has lasted for eons. It is a death from the outside in rather than the inside out, a physical surrender to the elements rather than a biological failure. As you rest, let your mind drift to the incredible resilience of this living wood. It is a quiet, steady endurance that requires no effort, only a deep internal strength. This strength is bolstered by a secret defense system that the tree has perfected over the millennia. To stay so young for so long, the bristlecone has turned its own body into a fortress, using a substance so powerful and so concentrated that it halts the very process of decay. This protection is found in the thick golden resin that saturates every fiber of the tree, creating a barrier that is almost like a solid block of ancient amber. It is this resin that holds the key to the tree's eternal youth, protecting it from the tiny invaders that would otherwise turn its heartwood to dust. Imagine, if you will, the scent of the high mountains, a crisp, sharp aroma of pine needles and cold stone. At the heart of that scent is the resin of the bristlecone, a thick, golden substance that flows through its narrow veins like a protective spell. This is what some call the amber defense, a biological masterstroke that allows the tree to stand defiant against the slow crawl of decay. While other trees might fall and rot within a few decades, returning their nutrients to the forest floor, the bristlecone pine has chosen a different path. It has turned its own wood into something more akin to stone or ancient glass. The wood of a bristlecone is so heavily saturated with this resin that it becomes incredibly dense. If you were to touch a piece of seasoned bristlecone wood, you would find it surprisingly heavy and smooth, almost like a solid block of high-grade plastic or a piece of polished amber. It doesn't feel like the porous, fibrous wood of a garden oak or a backyard maple. It feels permanent. This saturation is so complete that it leaves almost no room for the things that usually cause a tree to fail. In the natural world, death often comes from the smallest of things, microscopic fungi and bacteria that thrive on moisture and soft plant tissue. They are the great recyclers of the earth, breaking down fallen logs and turning them back into soil. But when these tiny organisms encounter the wood of a bristlecone, they find a fortress they cannot breach. The resin is toxic to fungi and repels the bacteria that would otherwise cause rot. It acts as a natural sealant, locking out moisture and preventing the wood from ever becoming soft. Because of this, the heartwood of a bristlecone, the very core of the trunk, can remain pristine and solid for thousands of years, even after a branch has died or a section of the tree has been exposed to the elements for centuries. The wood beneath the surface stays as strong as the day it was formed. It does not crumble. It does not turn to dust. Instead, it slowly erodes under the force of the wind and the ice, wearing away like a mountain peak rather than rotting like a plant. It is this internal preservation that allows the tree to maintain its structural integrity through the rise and fall of entire human civilizations. As you breathe in the cool, imagined air of the grove, consider the stillness of this wood. It is a quiet, chemical victory over the forces of decomposition. The tree sits in a state of near immortality, its fibers preserved in a golden resinous armor that defies the passage of time. It is a solitary existence, perhaps, but it is not a lonely one. Even in this harsh, high-altitude world, the bristlecone is part of a delicate web of life. While it guards its own heartwood with such fierce intensity, it has formed unexpected bonds with the creatures that call these white peaks home. The mountain is quiet, but it is not empty. Up here, amidst the twisted giants and the dolomite stones, there are others who have learned to thrive in the thin air. There is a specific rhythm to the life here, a slow and steady dance between the ancient trees and the animals that rely on them. As we look closer at the branches of these resinous fortresses, we see that the survival of the bristlecone is not just a matter of chemistry, but a matter of partnership, a silent agreement between the wood and the wings that move through the mountain sky. In the silence of the white mountains, a sudden flicker of gray and white wings might catch your eye, moving softly against the backdrop of the ancient wood. This is the Clark's nutcracker, a bird as hardy and resilient as the trees themselves. While the bristlecone pine stands still, rooted deep in the dolomite, the nutcracker is its mobile companion, a silent partner in the long, slow work of survival. This bird, with its sharp beak and keen eyes, plays a role so vital that without it these ancient groves might eventually fade away. The relationship between the tree and the bird is one of mutual necessity, a quiet agreement forged over countless generations. In the late summer and early autumn, the bristlecone produces small, woody cones. Tucked within the scales of these cones are the seeds, tiny packages of potential life, rich in the fats and proteins that a bird needs to survive the brutal mountain winter. The Clark's nutcracker has evolved a specialized pouch under its tongue known as a sublingual pouch, which allows it to carry dozens of these seeds at a time. It flits from branch to branch, systematically harvesting the bounty of the pines with a focused, rhythmic grace. But the bird does not eat all the seeds it gathers right away. Instead, it becomes the gardener of the high peaks. With incredible precision, The nutcracker flies to various spots across the rocky slopes, using its beak to push the seeds an inch or two into the soil. It hides them in small groups or caches, often choosing open areas or southern-facing slopes where the snow might melt a little earlier in the spring. A single bird can hide thousands upon thousands of seeds in a single season, relying on an extraordinary spatial memory to find them again when the ground is buried deep in white. Take a quiet moment to imagine the bird at work, a small, focused creature moving through the vast, cold landscape, tucking away treasures for a future it cannot yet see. It remembers the location of nearly every cache, guided by landmarks like a specific rock or the curve of a fallen log. But nature has a beautiful way of using what is lost. Despite the bird's remarkable memory, it never recovers every single seed. Some are forgotten, others are left behind, because the bird has more than enough to survive the winter. These forgotten seeds are the true legacy of the partnership. Tucked safely beneath the surface of the dolomite soil, protected from the drying wind and the hungry eyes of other scavengers, they wait. They are the seeds that will become the next generation of ancients. Without the bird to plant them, the seeds might simply fall to the ground beneath the parent tree, where the soil is often too shaded or crowded for a new life to take hold. By carrying the seeds away and burying them in the open, the nutcracker gives the bristlecone the space and the start it needs to begin its long life. As the winter snows eventually begin to melt, soaking the parched ground with cold, clear water, the forgotten seeds feel the first stirrings of life. It is a transition that happens with no fanfare, a tiny internal shift from dormancy to growth. Deep within the white, rocky earth, a microscopic root begins to push outward, seeking a foothold in a world that offers very little comfort. This is the beginning of a journey that could last 5,000 years. It is a process that requires a patience we can barely fathom, starting with a single fragile sprout that must now face the elements on its own. This tiny seedling, no larger than a blade of grass, is the first chapter of a story that will span millennia. Imagine a tiny green shoot, no thicker than a single pine needle, pushing its way through the pale, rocky crust of the mountain. This is the bristlecone seedling, and its beginning is a study in quiet, humble persistence. Unlike the lush plants of the valley that race toward the sun, growing inches in a single week, the bristlecone seedling understands a different kind of urgency, the urgency of the anchor. In these first fragile years, the seedling faces a world of extremes. The sun at 10,000 feet is intense, and the winds are relentless, threatening to dry out the tiny plant before it can even establish itself. To survive, the seedling makes a profound biological choice. It does not spend its limited energy on height or leaves. Instead, it pours nearly everything it has into a single, deep taproot. While the top of the tree remains a mere tuft of green, barely visible against the white dolomite, the root is busy. It winds its way through microscopic cracks in the stone, seeking out the hidden pockets of moisture left behind by the winter snows. It is building a foundation that must last for millennia. This is the secret of the ancient. The most enduring things are often those that take the longest to begin. If you were to visit this seedling year after year, You might think it had stopped growing altogether. A bristlecone may take 5, 7, or even 10 years just to reach 3 inches in height. To our human eyes, accustomed to the rapid pace of the modern world, this looks like a struggle. But to the tree, it is simply the correct pace. It is the pace of the mountain itself. Take a slow, deep breath and let yourself settle into that rhythm. There is no rush here. There is no deadline to meet, no height that must be reached by a certain time. Everything in the grove happens exactly when it is meant to happen. As you lie there, feel the weight of your own body settling into the bed, much like that tiny seedling settling its roots into the ancient stone. You are safe, you are grounded, and you have all the time you need. This slow growth is a deliberate strategy, a way of ensuring that every cell produced is dense, strong, and resilient. But even this patient growth is interrupted by the harsh reality of the high-altitude environment. The window for life is narrow. The sun may be warm in July, but the mountain air carries a constant reminder that the warmth is fleeting. The seedling must make the most of the brief summer, for soon the long shadows of autumn will begin to stretch across the peaks. The seasonal cycles here are not gentle transitions. They are powerful shifts that dictate the very pulse of the forest. The trees have learned to read these signals with perfect accuracy. They know that to survive the coming months, they must prepare for a stillness so profound it mirrors the silence of the stars. The brief, intense burst of summer activity is about to give way to a much longer, much deeper phase of existence. As the light begins to fail and the first frost grips the dolomite, the forest prepares for the great sleep as the first true blizzard rolls across the white mountains. The world transforms into a landscape of pure crystalline white. The vibrant, jagged edges of the Dolomite ridges are softened by a thick, heavy blanket of snow that will remain for the better part of a year. This is the beginning of the long winter dormancy, a period of rest that defines the very essence of the bristlecone pine's existence. For 6, 7, or even 9 months of the year, these ancient trees are almost entirely encased in ice and snow. During this time, the forest enters a state of metabolic stillness that is nearly impossible for us to comprehend. Their life processes do not stop entirely, but they slow to a near halt, becoming a biological whisper that barely registers against the frozen landscape. To look at a bristlecone in midwinter is to see a statue of wood and ice, seemingly as inanimate as the stone it clings to. Inside the tree, a remarkable transformation takes place. The needles, those tough, waxy bundles of green that have survived decades of such winters, stop their work of photosynthesis. The stomata, the tiny pores on the surface of the needles, close tightly to prevent the loss of precious moisture to the dry, freezing air. The flow of sap, which is already thick with resin, becomes even more viscous. It acts as a natural antifreeze, a complex chemical cocktail that prevents the water within the tree's cells from forming jagged ice crystals that would otherwise rupture the delicate cell walls. The tree is not struggling against the winter. It is yielding to it, entering a state of profound, patient suspension. This deep sleep is not a hardship or a period of suffering. It is a vital secret to their incredible longevity. By spending the vast majority of their lives in this quiet, low-energy state, the bristlecones preserve their vital resources. They do not burn through their energy reserves in a frantic race to grow. They do not exhaust their systems. They understand in their own silent way that survival is not about constant activity, but about knowing exactly when to be still. It is during these long, dark months that the tree's internal clock ticks most slowly, stretching out its 5,000 years of life by moving through time with the utmost economy. Imagine yourself there now, standing among these frozen giants under a canopy of cold, brilliant stars. The air is so chilled, it feels sharp in your lungs, yet the silence is soft and heavy, like a thick velvet curtain. The only sound is the occasional resonant groan of a massive branch adjusting under the weight of the snow, or the distant, lonely whistle of the wind through the high peaks. But deep inside the wood, beneath the layers of protective bark and frozen resin, all is quiet, all is calm. You can feel that same stillness beginning to settle into your own body. Your breath is slow and steady, matching the slow, rhythmic pulse of the mountain. Your mind is becoming quiet, shedding the worries and the noise of the day just as the trees shed the need for movement. Like the bristlecone, you are entering a time of restorative rest, a sanctuary where the outside world fades into the background, leaving only the peaceful, ancient rhythm of your own heart. But even the longest, deepest winter must eventually yield. The sun, which had been a pale, distant disk for so long, begins its slow ascent higher into the sky. The shadows that stretched across the snow begin to shorten and pale. The air, once brittle and sharp, starts to carry the faint, sweet scent of damp earth and melting ice. The great sleep is nearing its end, and the forest is preparing for the arrival of the brief, intense growing season. The transition is subtle at first, perhaps just a single drop of water falling from the tip of a needle, but it signals the start of a frantic, beautiful race against time. The summer of the high desert is coming, and with it, the most important few weeks of the entire year. Summer in the high desert is a season of brilliant, blinding light and sudden, fleeting life. It arrives not with a lush explosion of green, but with a subtle shift in the temperature of the wind and the dazzling reflection of the sun off the white Dolomite slopes. For the bristlecone pine, this is the most critical window of the entire year. As the deep snowbanks finally begin to recede, they release a precious, short-lived surge of moisture into the ground. This is the signal. After months of icy dormancy, the ancient trees stir, their internal systems awakening to a world of intense ultraviolet light and dry, thin air. Because the growing season at these altitudes is so incredibly short, often lasting only a few weeks between the last frost of spring and the first freeze of autumn, the trees must work with a quiet, focused efficiency. Their needles, some of which have been waiting for this moment for 30 or 40 years, begin the process of photosynthesis almost immediately. They capture the mountain sunlight, converting it into the energy needed to sustain another year of life. In this high-altitude landscape, the Dolomite soil plays a starring role. While it is too harsh for most other plants, its light color reflects the sun's heat, keeping the roots of the bristlecone slightly cooler and helping the soil retain the moisture from the snowmelt just a little longer. Imagine the tree in this state, bathed in gold, surrounded by the shimmering heat waves of the high basin. There is a sense of urgency, yet it is an urgency performed in slow motion. Even when the tree is in its most productive phase, its growth remains a lesson in patience. To a bristlecone, a growth spurt is a concept that barely exists. In a year where the rains are plentiful and the sun is kind, the tree might only add a layer of wood the thickness of a few human hairs. If you were to stand beside one for an entire summer, you would see no visible change at all. The branches would not reach further. The trunk would not seem wider. The growth is measured in tiny microscopic increments, fractions of a millimeter that will eventually, over the course of centuries, become the massive, twisted forms we see today. This slow-motion life is a beautiful response to a demanding environment. By never overextending themselves, even when the sun is warm and the water is flowing, the bristlecones ensure they are never caught off guard by a sudden return of winter. They take only what they need, growing with a discipline that is almost impossible for us to imagine. As you rest now, let that thought settle over you. There is no need to rush. There is no need to achieve everything at once. Like the tree, you can grow in the quiet, in the small spaces between the hours, trusting that the slow pace is exactly what is required. However, even in this sanctuary of stone and ancient wood, the world presents its challenges. Life at the edge of the sky is a balancing act, and the very factors that allow the bristlecone to live for millennia also bring unique risks. While they are shielded from many of the struggles found in the lower forests, they must still contend with the raw power of the elements. As we look closer at the grove, we begin to see how these ancients have learned to navigate the dangers of the mountain, not by fighting against them, but by incorporating the landscape itself into their defense. One of the greatest threats to any forest is fire. Yet here, in the high white peaks, the bristlecones have found a way to remain untouched by the flames that consume so much else. In the lower forests, where the air is heavier and the ground is covered in a thick blanket of needles and fallen branches, fire is a frequent visitor. It moves quickly, jumping from the forest floor to the low-hanging limbs, climbing upward in a rush of heat and light. But as we ascend higher into the realm of the bristlecone, the landscape changes. The lush greenery gives way to the stark, white expanse of the dolomite. Here, the rules of the forest are different. The resilience of the bristlecone pine against fire is one of its most fascinating survival strategies. It is not a resilience built on thick, protective layers or hidden reservoirs of water, but rather on the wisdom of spacing and the nature of the ground itself. In these ancient groves, the trees do not huddle together. They do not compete for every inch of space. Instead, they stand like solitary sentinels, often dozens of feet apart from one another. The ground between them is not covered in grass, moss, or shrubs, because the nutrient-poor dolomite soil simply won't allow such things to grow. There is no understory, no smaller plants to act as kindling or ladder fuels that would allow a fire to climb into the canopy. When a summer storm rolls across the peaks and lightning strikes the high ridges, a tree may be hit. It may carry the char of that strike for the next 1,000 years as a silver and black scar, a permanent record of a single violent afternoon. But because there is nothing but bare, broken rock between that tree and its neighbor, the fire cannot spread. It is a forest that cannot burn down because there is no path for the flames to follow. Each tree is its own fortress, protected by a moat of pale, cooling stone. This sanctuary of stone creates a profound sense of stillness and security. There is no rustle of dry leaves, no tangle of flammable vines. There is only the tree and the mountain. This isolation, which might seem lonely at first glance, is actually the tree's greatest protector. It ensures that even the most intense weather event cannot trigger a catastrophe that would end a 5,000-year-old life. Take a moment to feel that sense of safety in your own space. Like the bristlecone, you can find peace in the quiet gaps. You can let the world outside move at its own hurried pace, knowing that you are protected by the simple, calm boundaries of this moment. There is no need for the heat of the day to reach you here in the coolness of the night. While the world above the surface is one of wide spaces and rocky barriers, there is an entirely different story unfolding beneath the ground. The trees may look solitary above the soil, but they are anchored to the earth with a tenacity that defies the wind and the eroding slopes. To understand how a tree can stand for 5 millennia on a crumbling mountain peak, we must look away from the twisted branches and the weathered bark and peer into the darkness beneath the dolomite. We must look at the roots, the unseen foundation that holds the history of the world in place. If you could look beneath the pale dolomite stones, you would find a network of life just as intricate and weathered as the twisted branches above. This is the unseen foundation, the anchor that has held steady while empires rose and fell in the valleys far below. In most forests, we imagine roots diving deep into the dark earth, searching for hidden aquifers or subterranean rivers. But on these high peaks, the water doesn't hide deep underground. It arrives as winter snow. And when that snow finally begins to melt under the spring sun, the moisture sits briefly in the top layers of the rocky soil. To catch it, the bristlecone has adapted a unique and patient strategy. Its roots are surprisingly shallow, often resting only a few feet beneath the surface. But what they lack in depth, they make up for in an incredible wide-reaching span. They spread out in a broad circle, sometimes extending 40 or 50 feet away from the trunk. They are like sensitive, wooden fingers, laid flat against the cold mountain, waiting to catch every stray drop of moisture before the wind can whisk it away. It is a quiet, hidden labor, occurring in the dark, cool spaces between the stems. There is something truly surreal about these ancient roots that speaks to the sheer scale of their lives. Because these trees live for so many thousands of years, they actually experience the mountain changing around them in a way few other living things can. The wind and the occasional summer rain are slow, but over 5 millennia, they are relentless. They wash away the fine particles of dolomite, lowering the surface of the mountain inch by agonizingly slow inch. This process is so gradual that it is invisible to us, but the tree records it perfectly. Because of this, you will often come across a bristlecone with its roots entirely exposed. You might see huge, heavy wooden cables, some as thick as a person's thigh, that should be buried deep in the earth, but are instead suspended in midair, bridging the gaps between boulders. The tree has literally outlived the very ground it was originally planted in. It stands on its own history, its roots serving as a physical marker of where the surface of the mountain used to be 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. It is a living bridge held up by nothing but its own strength and the density of its resin-soaked heartwood. When you look at a root suspended in the air, you are looking at the passage of time made visible. You are seeing a physical measurement of how much the world has worn away since that tree was a tiny, fragile seedling. It invites us into a perspective that is often hard for the human mind to grasp, a sense of deep time. To us, a mountain seems eternal, a symbol of something that never changes. But to the bristlecone, the mountain is fluid and shifting. It is something that moves and erodes, while the tree remains the only still point in an ever-changing landscape. As you rest tonight, try to imagine that kind of stillness. Imagine being so deeply anchored, so patient, that the very mountains move around you while you remain steady. This perspective begins to shift how we see our own place in the world. We tend to measure our lives in years and our civilizations in centuries. But the bristlecone offers us a different yardstick, one that measures the world in the slow, rhythmic wearing down of stone and the quiet, steady growth of wood. It is a bridge that spans across the eras of human history, connecting the ancient world to the one we know today. Imagine standing beside a tree that has seen the entire span of what we call modern history. When the Roman Empire was at its height, the tree we are imagining was already over 2,000 years old. It was an elder even then, a seasoned veteran of the mountain's harsh winters. While the legions marched across Europe and the great philosophers of Greece were debating the nature of the soul, this tree was already standing in the same spot on the mountain, its roots already deep in the dolomite soil, its needles already reaching for the thin, cold air. It watched from its high, silent perch as the Middle Ages came and went. It felt the chill of the Little Ice Age, recording the drop in temperature in the microscopic thickness of its rings. It stood silent through the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment, and the Industrial Revolution. To us, these eras represent massive shifts in human thought, technology, and culture. They feel like vast, separate worlds that define our understanding of time. But to the bristlecone, they are simply cycles of the sun and the moon, a sequence of seasons that blend seamlessly one into the next. If you were to look at a cross-section of its wood, our entire modern world, from the invention of the steam engine to the launch of the first satellites, would occupy only a few dozen rings near the very edge of the bark. Our skyscrapers, our digital age, our greatest triumphs, and our deepest sorrows are all contained within a fraction of an inch of golden resinous wood. It is a humbling thought, but also a deeply peaceful one. It reminds us that while our lives may feel fast and sometimes overwhelming, there is a much larger, slower rhythm to the world. There is a pace of life that is measured not in minutes or hours, but in the slow accumulation of carbon and the steady passage of millennia. Take a slow, deep breath now. Let the air fill your lungs, cool and clean, just like the air at 11,000 feet. As you exhale, let go of the rush of the day. Feel the weight of your body against the mattress, as steady and unmoving as the ancient wood of the bristlecone. You are part of this long, quiet history too. You are resting in the shadow of giants who have seen it all and remain still. There is no need to hurry. There is no need to catch up to the world. You can simply exist in this moment, just as the trees do. As the sun begins to dip below the jagged horizon of the Sierras in the distance, a profound silence settles over the grove. The wind, which may have been whistling through the twisted branches all afternoon, begins to soften and fade into a whisper. The golden light of the late afternoon transition into a deep, bruised purple, and the shadows of the ancient trees stretch long and thin across the white, rocky ground. There is no sound of birds now, no rustle of leaves, only the deep, heavy stillness of the high desert at twilight. The mountain is preparing for another night, another small, quiet moment in its 5,000-year journey. The air grows colder, crisper, and the world begins to pull inward, settling into a state of deep restorative rest. As the last of the twilight fades into a deep velvet black, the sky over the White Mountains doesn't simply grow dark. It opens up into a vast, shimmering ocean of light. This is a place where the stars do not just twinkle, they blaze with a steady, piercing clarity. Because the ancient bristlecone pine forest sits so high at an elevation where the air is thin and remarkably dry, there is very little water vapor or dust to scatter the light from above. You are standing far above the clouds, above the humid haze of the valleys, and above the thickest part of the Earth's atmospheric veil. Here, the stars are among the brightest and most numerous you will ever see on our planet. Look up in your mind's eye at the great rift of the Milky Way. It stretches across the sky like a luminous silver river, so thick with stars that it casts a faint ethereal glow over the twisted shapes of the trees. The light you see tonight has traveled through the vacuum of space for hundreds, thousands, and even millions of years to reach this mountain peak. In a beautiful, silent coincidence, some of the starlight hitting the needles of a bristlecone pine tonight began its journey at the very same moment that tree first sprouted from the rocky soil 5 millennia ago. They are old friends, the stars and the trees meeting again in the quiet of the night. There is a shared sense of permanence here, a cold and quiet beauty that defies the frantic pace of the world below. The stars move in their slow celestial arcs, governed by laws of physics that have remained unchanged since the beginning of time. Below them, the bristlecones stand in their own slow-motion dance, governed by the patient laws of biology. Both are witnesses to the infinite. Both represent a kind of endurance that is difficult for the human mind to fully grasp. The trees do not reach for the sun during the day any more than they reach for the stars at night. They simply exist, absorbing the energy of the universe in a state of perpetual meditative stillness. The dead trees, those silvered skeletons of wood that have refused to rot for thousands of years, catch the starlight on their polished surfaces. They look like sculptures of frozen light, bone white against the darkness of the mountain. In this high-altitude midnight, the boundary between the earth and the cosmos feels thin, almost transparent. You can feel the rotation of the planet, the slow, heavy tilt of the world as it carries the grove through the stars. Take another breath, feeling the cool, thin air settle deep within you. There is no sound here, no traffic, no humming of electronics, no voices. There is only the sound of the universe breathing. The silence of the stars mirrors the silence of the wood. It is a restful, heavy quiet, the kind of quiet that allows your mind to finally let go of its anchors. You are drifting now, much like the light drifting through the void, finding a place of perfect stillness. The mountain is a sanctuary of time, a place where the past and the present are woven together by the silver thread of starlight. As the constellations shift almost imperceptibly overhead, the trees remain as they have always been, steady, patient, and profoundly at peace. They have seen this sky 1,000,000 times before, and they will see it 1,000,000 times again. In their presence, the weight of the future feels lighter, and the worries of the day seem to dissolve into the vast, glittering darkness. As you settle deeper into your own rest, imagine the grove as it is right now, bathed in starlight, bathed in silence, and held in the gentle grip of the ancient mountain. The world is vast, the stars are infinite, and you are safe within the quiet rhythm of the night. There is a deep wisdom in this stillness, a legacy written in light and wood that tells us that life, in all its forms, knows how to endure. It knows how to wait. And it knows, above all, how to find rest. The light of the stars above is matched by the light of knowledge held within the wood. This is the legacy of the rings, a gift of time left for us to decipher, a library of the Earth's history that remains open for those who know how to read it. For decades, scientists have looked to these ancient trees not just to understand the past, but to glimpse the possibilities of the future. The bristlecones are the planet's longest-running experiment in endurance, and their results are written in the very fabric of their rings, cell by cell, century by century. In the quiet laboratories where cross-sections of fallen wood are studied under soft light, the trees speak a language of profound resilience. By analyzing the chemical signatures and the microscopic widths of each year's growth, researchers are building sophisticated models of how our climate is shifting and how it might behave in the decades to come. The elders of the White Mountains have lived through centuries of severe drought, erratic frosts, and periods of intense, unyielding heat. They have already solved the problems we are only beginning to face. They show us exactly how much a living thing can endure and what it takes to remain standing when the world around it changes in ways we can barely imagine. This scientific partnership between humans and trees is a bridge across the ages, a conversation between the fleeting and the eternal. The data gathered from the bristlecone groves, the isotopes of carbon and oxygen trapped in the wood, helps us understand the rhythms of the Earth's atmosphere on a scale that transcends human memory. It allows us to prepare, to protect, and to learn from the patience of the wood. There is something deeply comforting in the realization that the wisdom of the past is being used to secure the safety of the future. We are not wandering blindly into the coming years. We are being guided by the steady, slow-growing hand of the ancients. They are the sentinels of our changing world, helping us navigate the unknown with the data of 5 millennia. The trees offer a perspective that is both humbling and hopeful. They remind us that life is not fragile. It is persistent. It finds a way to adapt, to store energy, and to wait for the return of better days. The bristlecones have survived for 5,000 years because they do not panic. They simply adjust their pace. They grow more slowly when resources are scarce, and they thrive when the sun is kind. They are teaching us the art of the long view, the ability to look past the immediate storm toward the centuries of calm that will surely follow. This is the true legacy of the Grove, the knowledge that survival is a matter of patience and steady, quiet persistence. As you lie there, let the thought of this ancient wisdom settle over you like a warm, heavy blanket. The world has a memory, and it is a memory of survival. The trees are still there, high on their rocky slopes, continuing to record the story of the earth in their slow, rhythmic heartbeat. They are the guardians of our history and the architects of our understanding. Their endurance is a testament to the strength of life itself, a strength that exists within the world and, in its own quiet way, within you as well. The legacy of the bristlecone is one of absolute continuity. It is a promise that no matter how the seasons change, the cycle of growth and rest remains unbroken. The wisdom of the elders is a light that guides us through the darkness, a steady presence in an ever-shifting world. You can rest deeply now, knowing that the story of life is long and that it is being held safely in the rings of the trees, waiting for the morning, just as you are waiting for the soft, inevitable embrace of sleep. As the night deepens over the white mountains, a profound and final stillness settles upon the ancient grove. The high-altitude winds, which have spent the day polishing the wood with ice and sand, finally begin to whisper and fade into nothingness. The air becomes perfectly motionless, cold and crisp, carrying the faint, clean scent of dry resin and ancient stone. In this absolute silence, the moonlight descends through the thin atmosphere, casting a soft, ethereal glow over the twisted forms of the bristlecones. The wood, stripped of its bark centuries ago, has been buffed by the elements until it shines like burnished silver. Under the pale light of the moon, these trees look less like living plants and more like sculptures of time itself, standing as silent sentinels against the velvet backdrop of a billion stars. There is a moment in the deep of the night when even the most ancient living things seem to hold their breath. The metabolic processes of the bristlecone, already so slow they are barely measurable by our instruments, sink into a state of total rhythmic peace. In this stillness, the boundaries of time seem to blur. There is no past to regret and no future to fear. There is only the enduring, quiet present of the mountain. The trees do not hurry to reach the morning. They simply exist comfortable in the darkness, waiting with a patience that has lasted for 50 centuries. Feel the weight of your own body now, sinking into the softness of your bed, just as the roots of the trees are anchored deep within the protective dolomite rock. Your breath is becoming slow and steady, mirroring the rhythmic, patient growth of the rings we have explored tonight. Each inhale is a quiet expansion, a gentle drawing in of peace. Each exhale is a complete release of the day's burdens, a settling into the earth. You are breathing with the mountain now, moving at a pace that disregards the frantic rush of the world below. Your heart beats with the slow, deliberate pulse of the forest. Imagine your breath as a single ring of growth, thin, strong, and perfectly formed. Just as the tree adds its layers year after year, century after century, you are layering piece upon piece, drifting further into the quiet, resilient core of your own rest. There is nothing left to do, no more facts to gather, and no more history to uncover. The journey into the high peaks is complete, and the path back to the waking world has faded away, leaving only this moment a perfect, silvered calm. You are safe in the company of the ancients. They have stood for 5,000 years, and they will be there when the sun eventually touches the peaks, and for thousands of years after we are gone. But for now, the sun is a world away, and the grove is draped in shadows and starlight. Let yourself go. Let the stillness of the high peaks wrap around you like a heavy, protective mantle. May your sleep be as deep as the roots of the Methuselah tree, as restorative as the long mountain winter, and as timeless as the constellations that watch over the grove. Sleep now, held in the heart of the ancient wood. Sleep in the silence of the white mountains. Good night.